And so one of the things that the Lynx system did for us is obviously it emphasized fairness. And the particular application for us is we're doing all results, so it eliminated a lot of timing appeals. But believe it or not, a lot of that stuff really does come up in the bid process. And so, you know, when you're talking to somebody, in particular new clients, I just always remind myself that this stuff really does matter, you know, not just to the athletes, but to the organizers. And as I'll talk about a little bit later, we sell to a variety of, you know, venues, clubs, races. So it really is important to emphasize some of those differentiations. As we've talked about, the Lynx products are very well manufactured. I've really only broken them in a couple of very predictable ways. You know, overheating them. Anyway, and really, again, I do a lot of work on the software side, and the integration piece here is very predictable with Lynx. So I'll talk about a couple of examples of that as well. So Regatta sports are interesting. As you can kind of see here, there's a lot of different distances. So part of what, you know, we emphasize, you know, is the portability of the solution and the applicability. So in a lot of our solutions, we just don't talk about selling one camera. We generally try and pair them up, or sell them in 3s or sell them in 5s, and sometimes clients listen. So again, for us, the why use of the water, the technical precision is greater. Interestingly enough, as compared to other markets, you're not giving the timing device to competitors in most situations, so there's less to lose. And venues, you know, definitely appreciate that when, you know, they lose a certain number of transponders a year, or they have situations like that. Within rowing, and again, the nice thing about these sports is that Lynx has already developed very good packages. Matt and I had a conversation about this a few years ago, and so part of what I'm going to present to you next is those packages. So the idea here is that with rowing, you end up with a couple of different formats. And then with both canoe, kayak, and rowing, you end up with intermediate split points. So most of the packages are based around those concepts. One word of advice, we tend to stick with the Pro camera as opposed to the Flex, and that's purely because rivers are wide. You know, generally each, you know, lane in a rowing venue is 10 to 15 meters. And so the overall issue is you just have to take a really high frame picture. And just to emphasize that point, what I'm actually going to do is just show you, this was a photo finish at a collegiate level from a few years ago. And again, this is one of the reference images that you have. And what you'll notice immediately about this picture, this is using one of the older FL100 cameras, but you'll see we're at 1728. In terms of the height. So even with the older cameras, we always emphasized the height as a real deterministic factor. So when it comes back to selling this product, I think your customer will appreciate it when you start on the Pro camera. And again, the other critical point to this is just, you know, the Radio Link start. Most courses, you're not going to run a 2,000 meter hard line. So this is a kind of good entry point. So the challenges in rowing are specific to the sport and specific to the fact that it's outdoors. So we do need elevated placement in most cases. So if you're in a building, you're generally going to be in the second or third floor. I mean, there's always issues with things like sighting extremely wide rivers. You know, we might do 750 meter sighting. So again, when you think through those issues, it's not just a matter of time synchronization, but it's really a matter of how tightly you can control the course variables and whether you can have an intelligent conversation with a client, you know, which eliminates problems later. You know, obviously, timing at 750 meters is a little strange. And again, you know, there's obvious things that as a service provider, I focus a lot on, which is, you know, controlling camera light sensitivity, and Doug set me straight a few years ago. So again, when you're in a building, the concerns are going to be a little bit different here. You know, is there adequate conduit space? What I tend to find, you know, is, you know, generally 3 to 4 inches of conduit space. We're always fighting with people to get more. So just something to think about, if you're involved in new construction. And then, of course, are they really thinking through camera mountings? Again, we typically tend to mount at least 2 cameras. So that just means that hopefully people are thinking about that up front, and there's some kind of system so that you're not sticking 3 or 4 tripods in back of each other. So again, the bronze solution is actually using the flex camera. It's an interesting entry point, but again, the constraints of this package are that you're running a cable 2,000 meters and you're using a flex camera. So I jump immediately into the silver package. And so the advantage to here is you start off with a wireless start, and it's a pro camera. So this is really what you're going to look at. And so again, I'll talk a little bit more about the affluence of the sport versus the pocketbook in a little bit. But this tends to be a good starting point to sell a solution. Now the gold solution here, as you can see, there's a lot more boxes here, but really what you're dealing with is television and additional split points down the course. So this solution is based on the microgate and just running a very long cable, 1,500 meters, basically to do those intermediate times. So now, again, as I kind of alluded to, we tend to sell things in pairs. So we do a lot of time trial work, and in doing that, we're selling both a start camera and a finish camera. So as a value add as a service provider, we developed a package basically that acts as a virtual scoreboard and allows you to accept inputs from multiple cameras, and then through an intermediate website then calculates elapsed time. But having said that, Lynx did come out with a plugin, a time trial plugin, which we'll also use as well. And that's, again, right off the shelf. So when it comes to it, I think these solutions are attractive because there's a lot of upselling potential. So a number of the people that we've sold to have come back for second cameras in the same way that other people do, but there's a higher inherent demand, for some of these. So again, in canoe kayak, there's actually rules mandating the second camera be available in international competitions. So that helps to emphasize the sale. Split timing, I think, is also a great avenue. I'll talk about competition in a second, but most of this still ends up being push button, or in some cases, we always promote a link solution where we actually put cameras every 500. And so again, there's plenty of selling opportunity there. As far as broadcast results go, the result TV package, I think, works really well. I think what also works is the emphasis on integration in the software. So we've done a variety of other integrations, and as I kind of alluded to, we'll get to those in a minute. So we got to start with one of the biggest head races in North America, which is it's a 2-day festival. It's the largest rowing festival in the world. And so we came to Lynx and said, we have this idea. And so it evolved over time, but more or less what ended up happening is that we started with 4 cameras and we ended up with 7. So the idea here was we'd have 2 fully redundant timing systems, basically so that the times we could use in a very consistent and we can analyze them in real time. So that was something that really emphasized us. And as we went along, we realized that we were just getting a lot better metrics in general. So then we rolled out Lynx cameras at each of the split times. So it was driving a worldwide audience on the web of 600,000 people, which is not inherently different in this day and age. But for me, it was a huge cultural impact. Because when I started, I find stories about the mom who couldn't attend the race in Wisconsin, who found out her results before her daughter got back from the event to put their boat down. And that kind of metaphor for me changed the industry. It went from being something where we were producing just an end product to something that was participating, in people in the racing experience much more directly. So it had a huge impact on me personally. You know, so we've got a couple different quotes here. One of them we obviously got from the Regatta, and the other from Doug. He eventually conceded that it was a better idea than he originally alluded to. So how big is the market? Well, okay, so regatta sports in general have an interesting history. They were originally a wagered sport back, you know, in the 1800s and early 1900s, and through a series of complications, they no longer are. But when it comes down to it, there's a lot of service, you know, business out there in these markets. We generally find there are new construction here, even in North America. In the last couple of years, there's been 2-3 new buildings, and so, you know, those are always the best opportunities, you know, really at, you know, kind of ground level. The demographics are particularly affluent. So again, there tends to be several, you know, sponsored races that, you know, are done at a much higher level than others. The major issue that we face is that, you know, within these industries, 50% of the competition is still hand timing, and that poses just another set of challenges. So service business within these markets are similar to others. On the rowing side, FIS is the international body. On the canoe kayak side, it's canoe, the ICF. So those contracts are bid out over, you know, 4, 8, 10-year cycles. So I'm going to focus just on a couple of customers that we sold to recently. So one of the courses that we did recently was in Oklahoma. Not exactly what you think of as a rowing center, but because there's quite a number of energy companies there, it turned out to be, you know, a market where through public financing and private company donations, they built a $6 million building, which in rowing is kind of, you know, very different. Most of the buildings are, you know, $500,000 in construction total. So it was interesting to participate in that because it's the first time that I actually heard somebody look at aesthetics over function. So all the cameras were hidden in the roof line of the building. You know, we had a whole series of challenges, you know, kind of working through that. Lanier was one of, I think, the first rowing camera sales. They still own their camera, and it's now been, how many years later?
60.
And so it's interesting because, you know, I didn't sell that camera, but they still call me, and we still work both on the canoe kayak and the rowing side. And oddly enough, neither of them talk to each other. So just, again, 2 sales opportunities instead of 1, which is nice. And then again, with the head of the Charles, you know, they bought a couple of cameras and bought into the solution and have, you know, run it again with a high degree of success. So, you know, how do you kind of get the fog to clear from the water in a lot of these sales? Well, again, when it comes down to it, you know, high accuracy, event flexibility. In rowing, there's a huge difference in formats. Some, you know, where there's a high volume of racing. There's also other events where they're on extremely tight centers. So, meaning, you know, you've got a race starting every, you know, 3 minutes. So you might be in a situation where there's 3 events that are simultaneously competing. You know, one that's finishing, one that's starting, and one that's about to start. So, you know, in that situation, you know, the software and the camera, you know, performs beautifully. And again, most of you probably know that, but, you know, I found that people are very reassured by the fact that, you know, they're not going to run into, you know, event restrictions. High quality, future expansion. We've seen some competition from new places, so, and I'd be interesting to see if, you know, some of the German guys here have come in contact with a company called IMS. So they sell an even more broad solution, which includes things like, you know, the buoy system, the actual course system, and the actual start system. So they've come up a couple of times. MyLabs has, again, had a camera that they've been working on for a number of years. But again, I'm not telling you anything new here. I mean, the purchasing process, you know, in all these sports is driven by a believer. So I try and find that person pretty early on. In regatta sports, a lot of we're dealing with a lot of foundations and organizations, so that also makes the decision a little more complicated just in terms of the bid process and getting the billing right. Sometimes there's board processes, and those tend to be closed bid processes, but again, at least in the US, just having a reputation and, having a 15, 20-year track record, makes a lot of those kind of conversations a lot easier. And then again, it really comes back down to relationship-based purchasing. So, for example, in this Oklahoma venue, a lot of what we did is we gave a lot of feedback on the master plan of the river. And then, that was developed 3-4 years ago, and now they're executing on that plan. So I'll talk a little bit more about my value. I kind of serve, here in North America as a central conduit for these sports. More than happy to talk to you about any opportunity. So again, even for Lynx, I've served as a customer reference. We work internationally, so to that extent where you're just looking for a piece of paper, we certainly do that. But we also offer consulting. We can lead or assist in building installations, meaning we can help you with the bid process. We can be on site. Send our staff to augment your own. In terms of international credentials, certainly that's something that we can help with. Either from the perspective of you've got some service provider business, or you're looking for some advice. And then again, as Paul emphasized, most of our clients these days we're doing virtual-based training. It just works out better for everyone. So I'm going to take a quick diversion here and talk a little bit about this picture. So I somehow get fantastically involved in new markets. So this is actually open water swimming, which oddly enough is actually run on a lot of, it's generally run on rowing courses. So we get a call from USA Swimming 2007, they're like, we're unhappy with the solution that we've got now. So I'm going to show you the evolution of where we ended up. We did the World Championships in 2010. So what I'm first going to start by doing is just showing you a video of this race. So let me just stop it right here. This is the second place finisher from about the 7th or 8th. And when I got into this sport, I didn't really realize, quite the competitive aspects of it, because originally the distances of these swims are, 5K, 10K, 25K. So I'm like, how close could they really be?
Oh my God.
So let's back that up for just a second here, and let's have one more time. So that was, again, the winner. Now, again, I try and find the most pessimistic situation. In this particular race, the hand timing sheets that I got from international professionals with, more than 10 years of experience, of that race, I got 2 times back on a manual timing sheet. So, and what you'll actually see is one more quick time. At one point, the 5th place competitor actually got a bronze medal. And mostly, you see right about there where that girl got dunked, that was a disqualification, which was kind of interesting. So again, this Chinese girl here, the pointer
was up there, I think, on the top of the stand, is it somewhere? Oh, you gave it back.
Charge the presenter $10.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if it's
Just cost you $10, please.
Right. So this girl right here, the Chinese girl, in 5th place actually got a bronze medal at one point. And welcome to international athletics. I never got informed when the Australian girl actually got reinstated. I just read the Australian website. So again, kind of breaking down what this solution entailed. Again, you can see there's the Chinese girl. And again, the interesting thing about the photo finish here, what we actually did is on the platform itself, we did a camera mount. And again, we put about, I want to say, almost 1,000 pounds in anchors to get this platform stable. It is actually floating in water. So we actually anchored the platform, and because it's a lake and a controlled reservoir, we were actually able to take these pictures directly with Lynx. So the idea here is that you've got, on the other side of the sign, you've got the same thing, you know, 2 Lynx cameras in reverse angles with high-def cameras above them. And then, in addition, you can see on the wrist here, there are actually transponders. So what we actually did is use the transponders for lap times, and then we used this. But again, what you'll notice is that in order to preserve fairness to the athletes, you know, there's actually a touch here. So if you're kind of following the solution, there's actually a board here, so we actually inverted the loop. So in this case, we kind of cheated and made the links a lot more accurate than what we could have gotten from the transponders. But by the same token, they reinforce each other. Just because you can see the very nature of finding hands in this picture took a certain amount of detective work. So it's a perfect example where identification was actually, you know, a very relevant. Because, you know, again, I think people always have this perceived benefit of timing in relation to how quickly it takes to produce them. So, you know, that was one of the ways that we reinforced this solution. So, again, what we try and stay very connected to is, you know, if you've got a client who's looking to do a master plan, something that really is a 3 to 5 year project, you know, that's something where, you know, offering this kind of advice opens up a world of opportunities for kind of both of us. So let me just talk a quick second. The other side to our business has been programming and real-time communications. So one of the advantages that we really had from Lynx early on was the network COM port plugin. But we've used you know, several of the plugins really to our advantage. So when it comes down to it, we're pulling times off of the socket. We have an integrated website. So one of the situations that we had last year was this event called the Dad Veils, which is this picture right here. So this tower has been in place for 40, 50 years and is one of the older towers in North America. But the race itself is very storied. It's, in terms of its cultural significance to Philadelphia, it's much greater than its actual importance. It's mostly a Division III event. But they recently picked up some major sponsorship. And so they partnered last year to do a live 4-hour broadcast. And so part of what we were able to leverage with the Lynx solution is, again, a network COM port-based solution that then fed information, both running time, to a broadcast. And I mean, again, part of the issue that you have with a sport like rowing is the distances. So, you know, they brought in almost 9 miles of fiber on the broadcast side in order to do that event. So you would think getting one silly little fiber line to the finish line from the 1,000-meter would have been easy. But even in that case, we had to come up with some other technical approaches to get that data from point A to point B. So one of the things that I've always focused on, you know, is the flexibility of the platform. So in that case, we gave them a direct socket and ran it over telephone wire. But we also had a backup where we were actually using our website and, you know, pushing all of this results over a socket and allowing them to pull the results back through the internet. And then again, we've always been a fan of statistical analysis. So the idea here, and this is what the Lynx platform supports so well, you know, is the ability to do you know, time-based synchronization. So we're generally taking all of those real-time feeds back into our website and then doing actual statistical analysis, you know, on the average and standard deviations between both Lynx cameras and also manual backups. That's what I got. Any questions?
Was Dennis going to do something about Dragon Ball? Do you know?
Yeah, exactly. It would be great to have him pop in right now.
That, if nothing else,
that should give you a really clear understanding of why you need to ask an expert. If you come from a track and field and athletics background and you're looking at the open water swimming picture, you're going, oh my God, how did they get results out of that? And that's where Jason's going to be very useful. We have Dennis Dirks with us from the Netherlands. Dennis, where are you? There you are. And can you able to talk a little bit about dragon boating for us? Just with your experience with what you did in Europe, just for a moment or two, that would be great. Do you need the projector? Yeah,
maybe.
Okay.
So I'm actually running on Linux. It's kind of got me worried a little bit, but it worked out fine. For some reason, a while ago, Giles asked me to do something about with his presentation on Regatta Sports, and I kind of figured that he did it because 2/3 of our country is actually below sea level. So we must have figured out at some point that yes, we were into water sports. We did two kind of nice things in the last couple of years. One of those was the World Championships rafting, and the other is the dragon boat thing. So, but because our country is being, below sea level for the most part, you guessed we would be used to water and we would be good at it. This is actually our timing team. When they asked us to do the World Championship rafting, they said, it would make sense for you to experience it so you know what the contestants actually go through, which makes no sense at all. You don't need to jump to be able to do a pole vault 6 meters to be able to judge it, but still, we jumped to the opportunity, obviously, to do that. And within rafting, they have 5 difficulty levels, 0 being a quiet lake, and 5 is what they did at the World Championship. This was actually level 3. The 2 people at the back are the national coach and one of the women who actually became a world champion, so it wasn't their fault. And there were actually 7 of us in the boat, most of whom you can see. And to use the laser pointer, this foot actually belongs to no one that you can see on the picture. It's just a So, in the end, we thought we wouldn't compete and just do the timing. Which apparently we weren't even the worst people there, because there was a team from the women's team from Turkey who were unable to swim. It makes no sense to me that you go into a boat, even with life vests on, to do that. We had quite an interesting solution because apart from being 2/3 below sea level, our country is also flat. So there would be no point in doing rafting at all, except that we have an artificial track that was built kind of like the Chinese track they did with the Olympics. And it presented us with a very easy opportunity to do timing, because you can actually see the finish line is located here at the end, and the starting line is just up here. So we use the radio links to communicate between start and finish. And since it was a World Championship, we set up a backup system as well, with its own radio links, frequency and connection. You could almost see the start line from the finish. The first couple of races, we actually had officials from the RF who were there to kind of see if we did a good job. But they couldn't see the starting line. So when the boats went out, they actually looked at our scoreboard and pressed their stopwatch, which makes no sense at all. And then when one of the judges missed the second or third race, she came over and said, "Do you actually have the time?" I said, "Sure, that's why we're here." And after that, she didn't bother to time at all. She was just sitting there drinking coffee. We had a box full of candy, which was very good for her. And you know, that's how we did it. At the end of the World Championship, we actually their administrator got hold of me and said, "You know, this is the first big event we ever did where timing was no issue. We didn't have one complaint at all about timing." And we were actually quite stunned with that, because I think the closest finish we had was about 6 seconds apart, which for us is, you know, time enough to get some coffee and do whatever we like. So it was done at the artificial track in Zoetermeer. When we first started out, they had no clue about timing whatsoever. They just called me, they Googled us, and they called me and said, "Can you do timing for rafting?" And the normal response to that is there a finish line? I said, "Yeah, there is." So, yeah, then we can actually do timing. Went over there, and the only thing that's listed in their rule book is that it should be done electronically. Full stop. That's it. So we kind of developed this situation where we use photo finish because using photo cells would have been a lot cheaper, but we're dealing with waves. So if you mount a photo cell, you do it too low, then actually a lot of times waves come through and they create false positives. If you set it up too high, people might go under it. And one of the interesting things about rafting is that all the people that start, so if you have a 4 people raft, all 4 people should be in the boat. And what they look for is not you being entirely in the boat, but just your feet. Which means if you fall out of a raft, just very close to the finish, the only thing they put in are your legs. Which also can mean that, you know, people are very low in the boat. So setting up the photo cells too high could prevent it from triggering at all. So what we set up is a primary system, which is an FinishLynx Pro, a backup system, which is a 2000 camera, just to make sure that we always had something. And we hooked it up to Result TV. About 3 weeks prior to the competition, they called me and said, you know, we're going to do a recording, and we sold it to 52 countries. Can you produce a running time there? And I said, sure, we have Result TV. I've never done it at that point. So I got a little nervous, but it worked out fine, because you just hook it up and try to figure out, you know, a readable color scheme, and it was actually broadcast in 57 countries in the end. We still use photo cells for triggering the scoreboard. Now, the main thing we've learned here is that if you're able to produce results within 2 seconds after a boat hitting the finish line, no one's going to complain at all, ever, because they figure if you can do it this fast, then it must be correct. Which isn't always true, but you know, apart from that, was one of the things we learned. Now, last year we did the national championships, not on the artificial track, but on a real lake somewhere in the southern part of France. And this is pretty much the same deal. You just need to be aware of a couple of things. One is the limitation of a wireless connection. It is severely limited by solid rock. So you cannot transmit through a mountain. And telling you that, to you, it hopefully makes sense that you cannot do that. Apparently not for everyone. We also noticed that if it's granite you're working on and you put the receiver pretty low, we connected it to one of the megaphones, and we figured out we couldn't get a reception, so we took a few poles and stuck it on there, and then we could actually connect to that. If you're ever going to do anything like this, make sure that you got the 500 milliwatts transmitter, not the small one. So that's one thing we've learned. Another thing is that you need a universal power supply, so make sure that you have some backup, especially if you're using a generator, because they sometimes fail. And test all the communication from start to finish, not just your starting signal, because it usually is better than the connection you get from using something like a Vodafone or anything else. The other event we did wasn't the World Championship drafting, it was actually the European Championships Dragon Boat racing. And that one was done at an Olympic venue in Amsterdam, which is the Bosbaan. It is a wide track, and I kind of deleted 5 or 6 slides before I got here because they were pretty much the same as the presentation you saw before. So it's a wide track, and better make sure that you can actually cover that by doing it. But if it is an official track, usually there is a finish tower, and it makes your life so much easier because you just have all the setup done there. Most things we do for dragon boating is pretty much this. We go over to, a lake, a harbor, whatever, set up a tent and set up a finish camera and just time. And the funny thing is, if you're doing dragon boat racing, most of the teams there are just doing it for fun. So this is your local bank competing against a grocery store or whatever. And somehow once they get in the boat and the drums start beating, they're really fanatical about it. So the first few times, again, when we did do timing, we got a lot of complaints about the time. People saying, no, we were actually first because we saw that. And then you showed them the photo and say, no, you weren't. And say, oh, sorry, and never come back again. So now we might just, put down the camera and never hook it up and do the timing manually, and still no one would ever come to complain because they just trust what we're doing. That's not what we do, by the way. The first few times we did events like this, they came over and said, are you able to keep up with us? And we said, it's one race in about 20 minutes. So, yeah, everything else we do is a lot, more complex and much faster. But still, it's a nice market to be in because there's actually no competition, and there is no way to be able to do this without the wireless start. And as probably most of you, I love the option we have to use radio links. I love the thing Microgate did with it. We actually win deals both on this and in track events because we have a wireless start. Basically what we found out is that everyone who does timing is pretty lazy, so they don't really like to wind up all the cabling after doing a full day of racing, and just giving them a transmitter saying, stick this to your gun, or stick the sensor to your gun and put this in your pocket, and it'll work, is actually one of the differentiators that we see happening with every event if we sell that. So, it's exactly 12.
Yeah, are you done?
Sure.
Yeah. Dennis Dirks from the Netherlands, thank you.
Can I just quickly ask if I know Nikolay has timed, Nikolay, you here? Yeah, you've timed Dragon Boat racing?
Yes, European Club Championship.
European Club Championships, and I believe, anyone else here timed Dragon Boat? Graham, the Germans, Finland, Wilson, Puerto Rico, and Philippe Paulet. And as you know, and also at the back in Slovenia. Yeah. So we as Dennis said, there's no competition. It's a good place to be. With that, it's time for lunch. You know who your experts are. We'll lunch. Stacey, is it in Fiesta that way? Lunch is where breakfast was. So do go and have some lunch and socialize, and we'll see you back here at 12:45-ish. Thank you.
I guess we could do some lights.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I have the correct one because I have the wrong one.
Just?
I'll have to ask you.
Yeah, I have no
Piece for you for the Russian.
You know which one it was? Because I have to check. There was something wrong on one of them.
I think it's the one I just gave Ed.
Okay, sure.
I am really.
Okay, maybe I'll just.
Hey.